For some people, the question isn't just how to pay for college, but is college worth it? To explore this question, I sat down with Jeff Selingo, who wrote College Unbound, The Future of Higher Education and What It Means for Students. Will you tell us a little bit about your background and help us frame this question of is college worth it and the financial return on a college degree?
This question about the value of higher ed has really come up in recent years, and I think a lot of it has to do with the economy. A lot of college graduates now are struggling to launch after graduation, and so people are asking, is it worth it? I'm spending all this money, this idea of the return on investment, and then of course you get famous people like, Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs, who didn't graduate from college, and everybody thinks it's like the NBA, I could play basketball and be the next, LeBron James, but that doesn't happen in higher ed. I mean, if you look at any statistic, if you just think about higher ed from the economic standpoint, the return on investment is incredible.
Right. So recently it seems that in the press, in politics, and certainly from my seat, people visiting college campuses are asking this question a lot more now than maybe ever before. How and why has that really emerged here in the last few years in particular?
I think people want to know the differences between institutions, right? Because as publics have become more expensive, it's not a slam dunk. Well, I'm just going to go to a public. I'm not going to have to spend much money for my degree. So it's worth it in that reason. For that reason, private tuition has gone way up in the last couple of years. And so now I think, and we have better data on the differences between institutions, again, on earnings afterwards.
Right.
Many states now have public databases where you can look at earnings by institution, by degree. So this idea that higher education could kind of ride the coattails of these national averages, I think are now over. And I think parents kind of get that. And so they want to know, the difference between the University of Georgia and Georgia Tech and Emory and Georgia State. Now they can see that and they want to know, okay, I'm going to go to college, no doubt about it, but should I pay $10,000 more to go to this institution versus this institution? Is the question I think they're increasingly asking.
How should families go about considering this dollar value, let's say, versus that? And at the end of the day, how do they analyze and take all of this into consideration when they're looking to make that investment or simply pay for college?
Right. Well, first of all, I think looking solely at earnings is a big mistake for various reasons. First of all, the earnings are mostly self-reported by all these different magazines and all these other different websites. In some cases, they are reported by the state, so they're a little bit more accurate. But most students have no idea what they're going to major in when they come to college. They're probably going to switch at least one time or twice, according to national statistics. So you could come to college thinking you're going to be one thing and look at the earnings for that one degree and then end up switching. And so it may not make any sense at that point. I think more important for parents and students is to look at the whole range of data points around college completion. So, what is the completion rate for students, the graduation rate for students like me? They differ between men and women, first generation students, non-first generation students, they differ by major. Look at that, right? How long is it going to take me to graduate from this institution? What's my debt level going to be like when I graduate? What are the job placement rates? So look at the numbers and look at earnings, take that into consideration, but we shouldn't just look at one thing. And at the end of the day, college is much more than about getting a job. And I think that we need to really think about the value of higher education in turning us into, adults, turning us into citizens, turning us into thinkers. And that can't be measured easily.
Thinking a little bit about again, sitting down with a family and talking through this idea of, will college pay off? What are the first things that you would point them to talk about experience and return? I mean, how do they go about having that conversation, both from the cost standpoint and then some of these tertiary benefits or experiential points that you're talking about?
I think that we tend to start looking at colleges pretty early in high school, which is sometimes dangerous, I think. You get emotionally attached to a campus before you ever know how much it's really going to cost you. And then by the time you're a senior and you may get accepted, maybe not, and you're maybe devastated over that if you don't get accepted, or you're devastated when you get the financial aid offer and it's not what you expected. And now suddenly you have to make a real decision about, is it worth it? So I think the first question that I think parents and students should consider is, first of all, how much are we going to really pay? How much can we really afford? To talk about the affordability of higher education, and also to look at a range of institutions, publics, privates, 2 years, 4 years, so that you're not your whole emotional state is not set on one institution or even one type of institution.
There's a lot of conversation right now surrounding the community college initiatives from a political standpoint, et cetera, but also as a strategy, lower cost, moving on ultimately perhaps to a different institution to culminate that degree. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the landscape out there surrounding that concept.
I'm a big fan of starting at community colleges. In fact, if you look at the statistics now from the Sallie Mae survey about how Americans pay for college, almost 25% of students at community colleges come from families making over $100,000 a year. Okay. Back in 2008, that was under 10%. Right? So we have so many more students coming from families who have more financial wherewithal saying, hey, I'm going to start at a community college. Now, there's some dangers of that. You want to try to complete, you want to try to get that associate's degree, you want to be able to transfer those credits. But the nice thing about a community college, especially if you're unsure about what you want to do, it's a great place to test out a lot of your career options. They have sometimes smaller classes for those first year students than a 4-year college might have. So it's definitely an option, but make sure that in many cases, the bachelor's degree is going to pay off more than an associate's degree. So if your ultimate goal is to transfer, make sure you're on the path to transfer.
How do you determine, is it worth it in this sense? I've found the right place, but I'm going to incur a good bit of debt. What should be the conversation and the thought process behind that?
I think there should be a lot of conversation around what is an appropriate amount of debt, right? I think students should have skin in the game. I think that they take their studies more seriously if they're taking on some debt. So I really do believe that students have to take on some debt, but you really want, a good rule of thumb has always been, you don't want to take on more debt than the average salary of a new BA, which is in mid-30s, I think, or somewhere around there. So, 30,000, high 20s probably is appropriate. Think about the don't just think about the overall number, think about what a monthly payment might look like after college. But in my mind, you don't want to go too high because I think it limits your options after college. I'm working a lot now talking to students who are recent college graduates, and I'm really amazed at the students who had a lot of options after college. They could move to different cities, they could take different types of jobs, they could become entrepreneurs because they had one thing not hanging over them, and that was a big debt bill.
Got it. So I'm kind of curious then, just in wrapping up a little bit, basically your elevator pitch. You've got a family here, and they're really on the cusp of making a decision to go off to college for their students. What are the primary things? What would you tell them that they should do as they're kind of assessing making a selection of a place and the money associated with that?
Well, the first thing is not to stress too much about it. I think there's a lot of stress over admissions. Getting into the right school. I actually think institution, college matters, but I think students actually matter a lot more. What a student puts into his or her education matters a lot more than where they go at the end of the day. So I think that's number one, stress less about it. And then second, look at more than just a couple of options, right? Everybody has their safety schools, but have your safety options. And what do I mean by that? Look at 2-year colleges, look at 4-year colleges, look at public and privates. I think that everybody kind of focuses on a subset of institutions. They get so set on those. And in the end of the day, there's not that many differences between them. I think that they should look at institutions that are truly different from each other and finally decide what's best for them.
Great. Well, thank you again.
Thank you. It was great to be here.